Today we will have a look at one of Notion's latest features, database automations. So personally, I'm using Notion for more than 2 or 3 years now, and I'm using it mainly for my business, so for task management and client management and of course content planning. And I love Notion, but there was always one issue I had with that app. It lacked automations. Of course, there were ways to circumnavigate it, like using buttons or using external tools like Zapier or Make.com. Those tools enable you to automate almost everything inside of Notion, but the problem is, of course, that those tools are more complicated and it takes some time to set everything up correctly. So in the end, I was basically never using Zapier or Make.com to automate anything in my Notion workspace. Then a few months ago, I finally received the news I was waiting for such a long time. Notion enabled database automations. With one caveat. Well, the automations, they are enabled for pro users, not for users who are using only the free plan and not paying money to Notion. So it's one of the first features after Notion AI that is exclusive for customers that pay money to Notion. So if you're using the free plan and you're not planning to upgrade your plan, then this video might not be of value for you. But of course, there are some ways to use automations even when you have a free plan. For example, you could duplicate a template with automations into your workspace, and then that automation is working actually in your Notion account, even if you have a free plan. But the problem is you cannot edit it. You can only turn it on or turn it off. At least it's better than nothing. And before we proceed with setting up an automation in Notion, I want first to clarify what an automation is or is not. So what is an automation? Well, it's something automated, yeah. According to the definition, automations are sequences of actions executed by software without human intervention. So we humans are not necessary actually, and they are based on predefined rules, conditions, or algorithms. And they can make repetitive tasks more efficient, error-free, and faster. And how that works in practice and for which things you can actually use database automations inside Notion in practice, well, that's something I will show you now in my video. So let's dive into Notion. We're here on a Notion page and you see 2 databases, one for projects and one for tasks. And if you hover over that database menu here, you see a new icon. It's a lightning icon and it's in the middle of that menu. So let's click on it and the automation menu appears. And here we can set up our automations. So what is the first thing we can do here? I want to create an automation for default tasks because it's one of the most useful things for my business workflow. Very often I'm creating projects and then I want to have the same tasks linked with that project again and again. For example, when I'm creating a YouTube video, I always want to have tasks like researching, writing a script, shooting the video, editing the video, and uploading the video inside my task database. But to add them manually, that's a lot of labor and it's a bit tedious. So it's much better to automate that. And by the way, you can also do that for the same principle of default tasks. You could do that for onboarding of clients or for the onboarding of new team members. So let's start by creating a new automation and we click simply on new automation here, give it a name, default tasks. And now we have to add a trigger. The trigger, first we should decide in which database it gets triggered. By default, it's the database we have created the automation in, but you could use another database if you wish so. But in our case, we stay here in the projects database and we add a trigger. Now we have several options. We can say it's triggered when a page is added or when a page is edited. In our case, we say no, page added. That's enough. So as soon as a page is added in a project's database, that automation gets triggered. And after the trigger comes the action. What's our action? Well, it's the creation of a new page in the task database. So again, we add page to, this time not the projects database, but the task database. And that's by default, it's a blank page. So we give it a name and we say that page is about researching content. Now we could edit another property. Yeah, and what makes sense in our case is to link it with projects, because we want to have a task that is linked with the project it is in. So the project, that's, we don't have one here, but we can say this page. Then by default, it is always selecting the project that is triggering that action. So, and that's it. We have created our first task, but we can of course now create more tasks, and we should. Otherwise, for one task, the automation would not make sense. So again, we create a database and create now the second task. And this goes on and on and on. Well, we are done. I've created now about, I think, 4 tasks. So let's create this automation and we close that. And so what's happening when we create a new project here? Click on new project, give it a name, YouTube video, and let's see what will happen. Yeah, something is happening here. We have now 4 tasks that were created automatically, and they are linked with the project in the project database. That's very nice. And of course, we could also now go more into detail and say when we create the automation that they have a certain status and maybe a certain date. But I think for the showcase, you got the point. So here in the task database, there's something we can do as second showcase for automations that is useful, I think, for a lot of people, especially for people that are working as freelancers. It's creating a time tracker in Notion. Before automations, that was tedious to do because you had to enter the data or the dates or time manually. And that's, of course, too tedious. So most people, stuck with external tools for time tracking. But with automations, that's something that can be easily done. And you see, we have here 2 properties for start time and end time. And let's create a new automation. And a new automation, click here, that gets triggered by pages in the task database. And the trigger is in this time not a page added, but a property edited. And it gets triggered when we edit not the time properties, but the status property. Because if we change the status to something, for example, to working, then the start time should get changed. So you see the trigger status is set to working. And then do this. What's the action that is following? The action is the start time. The start time will be set to now. For time tracking, that's important because today would just be the date of today, but not the time of the day. So now is also adding the time of the day, and that's important, of course, for time tracking. Let's create that. And we create a second automation that's pretty similar. Again, when the status is changed, this time to finished, then we add the end time. And let's create. And now we have this. Now we have the two automations, and let's see how they're working. We are changing the status to working, 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 and there's something happening. You see, the start time is set with the date and the time, and if we change it to finished, then you see that we have now the end time. And that's how you time track in Notion with the help of automation, of database automations. And that's how you use database automations in Notion. So of course, in this video, I could not cover everything you can do with automations. If you have any ideas or suggestions, feel free to share them in the comments of this video. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.